Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
All right, Vikings Vent Line every Sunday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feed. Just a reminder, Vikings Vent Line is your show, Vikings fans. And if you'd like to come on a future episode, you want to talk about the offseason, recap what happened this past year, whatever is on your mind, this is a place for you on Vikings Vent Line. You can hit me up if you want to join a future episode. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com for those that want to join. Love talking and connecting with Vikings fans from all over the country, all over the world for that matter. So this is a show for you. If you'd like to be involved, please hit me up. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. Shout out to our friends at Underdog. Got that big game that's coming up here, and our friends at Underdog are offering a free pick, new customer free pick offer. So if Travis Kelce will have a 0.5 total yards. If you're a new customer and you haven't signed up for Underdog, you get a free pick for the big game by using promo code SCORE, SKOR, and you'll get a 50% deposit match. Plus, there's also a no sweat token, I think, for the current users right now as well. So plenty of great options for that big game that's coming up in the next week or so. Go download the Underdog app, promo code SCORE for a 50% deposit match. I'm going to get my guys Justin and Steven in here in just a little bit. We're going to preview what players we want to see come back, obviously some draft targets, some other things here on Vikings Vent Line. Super excited to connect with them. We have off-season blueprint episodes that I'll be firing off throughout next week as well. Write that down. There was a great Thor's Day that happened on a Friday a few days ago, obviously with Thor from Mobile, Alabama, so we want to go check that out. That's on this podcast feed and YouTube channel. This is Purple Daily. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die. So let's get our guys in here. Let's get Justin and Steven in here on Vikings Vent Line. Fellas, how we doing?
Doing good.
Doing well, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, well, glad to have you guys on. Justin, you were on after the Rams lost from the regular season, and you poetically predicted that if they see them in the playoffs, they're going to lose. And I don't know if you had a crystal ball. I don't know what it was, but your prophecy came true, unfortunately, for the Vikings.
Yeah, I think it's just, the mentor meets the mentee, and it's just trying to get over that hump. And, like we always talk about our defensive backs, our corners. I just feel like we weren't ready for Puka Nacua and, Cooper Kupp coming back and just watching us get kind of decimated. I know everybody always talks about that face mask at the end of the game, but I think there was just a ton more that we just weren't prepped for. So
absolutely. Yeah, it was a bummer. And Steven, you've been on before. I think when we both had dueling mustaches on. Right now, I've got my version of a 5 o'clock shadow, if you can even call it that. I had the mustache off, but you're now back on Vent Line. How you doing? What's going on?
Doing well, thank you, man. I always look forward to this time of year. Actually, this is how I discovered you guys, was the off season of a year ago. Was after the Giants loss in the wild card. So unfortunately, not really winning any wild card games when I'm on the show, but I'm looking forward to this offseason, all the cap space. I mean, the blueprint's there. And, I think this is really going to be the make or break offseason, because if you play your cards right, you're setting yourself up for hopefully a dynasty yourself here. So looking forward to see what the Vikings do. I loved what they did last offseason, especially moving off of Kirk and just deciding to bite the bullet with the cap space for a year and set themselves up for this year. So
well, let's get into a little bit of an offseason blueprint here, at least from the Vikings fans' perspective. Mackie, Judd, and myself did one last Monday. We'll do another one this coming week. But Justin, I'll start with you. Which Vikings players that are pending free agents, do you have any that you would like to see come back to the Vikings? Do you want to see which ones Kwesi should prioritize to bring back in 2025?
Yeah, listening to your blueprint, I liked your guys' like the depth guys you guys you wanted to bring back, like Jihad Ward, I think is a good one. Either Tillery or Bullard would be good depth guys on the defensive interior. And I think it was Judd that was saying if Jones will come back on our terms, I think that would be really good to have a veteran leader in there and running backs. Obviously, I think they're going to focus on that in the draft. But I still think the two biggest ones are Murphy and Bynum. I know Bynum might be a little bit more expendable on that front, but you have him and Josh Patelis that are kind of those gel guys, those fun guys in the locker room. They do all the celebrations. That vibe is up. It keeps that positivity in that locker room. So, Bynum's. I think last year, Bynum was more of that closer. Like he come up with those end game scenarios more than like this year. But I think my two big guys, no matter what, would be Bynum and Murphy, just for a whole different array of reasons. So.
Yeah, you bring up a point of the culture part of what they bring, the stuff off the field, and yes, they're impact players when they're on it, but kind of removing some important cogs there can cause some issues, and then you can build up a roster and play GM mode on Madden or just in the offseason like we do, but then you kind of have to have that quantifiable part of chemistry and locker room stuff. Both those guys are huge chemistry players. Fans love them too. So yeah, I understand. I don't know if they're going to be able to afford both of them. I wouldn't
Right.
be shocked if both of them come back. There might be a tough decision between one or the other. Harrison Smith probably also factors into that, what he decides to do with his career going forward. Steven, how about you? I know you said you had kind of plans for free agency too before maybe even like circling back. So where do these two type of things dovetail for you? Who do you like to see? Who would you like to see come back? And whoever is exiting, what are some players you'd like to see the Vikings target?
Well, man, I got to throw my my Madden GM hat on because man, I love that when I was younger playing roster building here.
Yeah.
It's a little easier on the video games than it is in real life. But I mean, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic with bringing Byron Murphy back, and I'll tell you why. I'm worried about giving a guy a bag after he had one career year. I mean, I know on this show, listening to you guys during that 2023 season, we talked about how terrible he was. Every week his PFF grades were bad. He was just terrible in coverage. Maybe it was the Donna Shell coverage. I don't know. But either way, like it's great that he bought in to to Brian Flores defense and was able to have an amazing season. 6 picks in a year is incredible. But can he continue to do that next year over year over year over the length of a $16 million a year contract? So I agree. I feel like getting back Murphy and Bynum is going to kind of cripple you a little bit in terms of the financial freedom of the cap space, building up maybe the trenches a little bit more, which I prioritize. So I'm kind of looking at it from a perspective of what positions can you afford to draft and develop and wait on versus what are the immediate needs right now to protect JJ McCarthy and this team moving forward and be able to make a better team in 2025. So in my opinion, I think if Harrison Smith decides that he wants to retire, I feel like Bynum is probably the most important guy to bring back. That way you have Theo Jackson in the mix with Bynum, and you're not just throwing a bunch of new guys out there. But I heard you guys talking about how it seems like Harrison Smith is potentially talking about coming back now that Flores apparently may not get a head coaching job, which is beneficial for us, I suppose. So I'm looking at that from the perspective of if he comes back, maybe you can afford to lose Bynum, plug Theo Jackson in there, maybe draft a guy. This is where, not having Lewis Seen pan out really hurts. And so at the offseason blueprint, I mean, you could do all you want to do in free agency, but you have to hit on some of these guys in the draft. And if you can build your secondary and maybe a defensive lineman or something in the draft and these guys pan out, I mean, I'm worried about paying Cam Bynum, is he as good as Kirby Joseph and Antoine Winfield Jr. and these guys? Should we be paying him like that? He's great out there. He's always out there on the field running around making tackles. But is he elite level money? And I'm just worried that, someone's going to try to talk up his market like that, and we're going to be overpaying for some of these guys. So I'd rather see us, be spending the majority of our money in the trenches. I would love to see us sign 2 guys at least on that offensive line, maybe keep Bradbury for his final contract year. And, the positions that you can afford to allow guys to develop, you need to draft well, scout well, and make them success.
We'll get in the draft here in just a sec, but Justin, externally looking at the free agents that the Vikings maybe could go get or positions that you'd like to see them sew up in free agency before, obviously, the draft takes place in late April. Are you looking at anyone or any position group that you'd like to see the Vikings kind of address immediately, and then that'll factor into maybe their draft plans?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agreed with you when you were doing that blueprint at the beginning of the week. I think going out, if Trey Smith is going to be available, I think it's unlikely. I think the Chiefs find a way to keep him. But I'm going to go from a more of an optimistic standpoint and say he's available. I think you go lock it down. I mean, spend the money. I mean, you look at the Steve Hutchinson era and things like that. He's going to make people better around him too. And if you want JJ McCarthy to stay healthy, he's coming off a knee injury. He's a rookie. He's young. He's lost weight. I know everybody's been kind of seeing that too. I know they're going to bulk him back up, but you got to keep that kid upright. I know he's going to be able to be maneuverable and, make plays, things like that. But I think a big splash at guard is going to make a huge statement. And then another thing kind of ties in with my Bynum Murphy kind of re-sign blueprint is I think if you bring Murphy and Bynum back, they're also more solidified in Flores' system. They kind of know it. They can kind of bring these guys up and going and keep them up. So I agree with you too, Stephen, with the Bynum thing. I think he's the most, expendable. I think that you can kind of float around Harrison Smith and Theo Jackson and bring them in. But my concern with, Smith is going to be the age factor. I think he's going to be very smart. He can play clutch. I think he can play like playoff games, big games, but he needs to be there to also bring somebody else up. So my other big one would be another corner. I really like Travarius Ward from the Niners. I think he's coming up on an expiring contract. And he's a little bit older than like a DJ Reed. So he might be a little bit cheaper, but I'm also big on getting some go-getters, man. This team is missing that, like, you need somebody who's going to chirp. I mean, for a lack of a better term, a psychopath on defense, man. Like, and I think DJ Reed could fit that bill really well too. He's a physical corner. I remember when they played the Vikings played the Jets, and he was guarding JJ, and he's just chirping. He's just chirping all day long. I mean, nobody's going to guard JJ, but it was fun to watch because somebody who has that confidence to step up to the line and do that press coverage and just shove a guy back a couple of yards and, kind of delay him. So, I mean, if the money's right, I would more, lean towards like a DJ Reed. But I wouldn't be opposed to a Travarius Ward, and then kind of step back in the draft and then focus for me would be more on defensive interior and like offensive line help in the draft. But my two biggest splashes would be the Trey Smith and the DJ Reed Jr. in free agency.
Yeah, I agree with Justin 100%, especially about going after a corner in free agency. But just so we're clear, so we're moving on from Sam Darnold. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're all in unison, right?
Oh, yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish him the best. I'm happy for him. He like revitalized his career. He's probably gonna get a good payday. If the Vikings like didn't draft JJ McCarthy last year and they had a shrug emoji and this quarterback class is kind of weak going in, I actually wouldn't be opposed to bringing him back. But that's not the plan for the Vikings, and they're going to turn over to JJ and find obviously a backup quarterback of their choosing. When you look at the draft, Vikings just have the first round pick. They have a couple fifths. They should get a comp pick in the third. I know we talked about positions and where they can maybe develop in, but Steven, what are the areas in the draft you want to see the Vikings address? Do you want to even see them trade back to accumulate more picks? What's kind of the draft strategy you want to see the Vikings implement this year?
Well, I mean, I remember you guys talking on the show about how this is kind of a weaker draft class. There's only so many players that have a first round grade. So I'm kind of curious to see, sitting at 24, there's always a few surprises in the draft. Does somebody fall? Is that a position of need? Is it maybe someone like the Heisman running back? I can't remember his name, but the winner that has been mocked to the Cowboys. I mean, look, it's Jerry Jones. What if they pass on him? I wouldn't be surprised. But I mean, I think honestly, as important as it is to us to want to find a defensive tackle, which I know there's a lot of in this draft, or maybe even draft a corner, I think this team needs to draft a running back. I heard you guys talk about on your show the other day. It was NFL. What was it here? NFL mock draft database. They had 12 running backs in the top 150. I heard Mackie mention that, and I think we need to go get one of them. Identify the one that's going to fit your system, beef up the O-line and free agency, and have some resemblance of what McCarthy had in Michigan with a run game. I think you're seeing it time and time again in the playoffs. Your vulnerabilities will be present very quickly when you're facing these teams and they have time to game plan for you. And our run game has just been lackluster for the last couple of years. I know it's Kevin O'Connell's gotten a lot of heat for his lack of a run game. And I wonder, is it a little bit of everything? Just the running backs that we've had, the interior offensive line? Is it maybe just the confidence and the run game at certain times, especially in those goal to go situations? So I think it's important for us to go out there and find our Jamar Gibbs, to find our BJ or Bijan Robinson, and find the back that's going to carry this team into deep playoff drives. You can't be having people like Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy dropping back 40, 50 times that expect to beat these superior teams. They're just not. So, I mean, if it means trading down, getting one in the early second round, cashing in a third round pick as well, maybe addressing defensive line there or something, I'm 100% on board for that.
Yeah, they they need running back help for sure. I think, and this is probably a good conversation, and you bring up good points, Stephen, of a jumping off point for future episodes of how do they build their offense around J.J. McCarthy as someone who didn't pass a ton at Michigan. That was a knock on him. Like, is he even a true quarterback? And he had a great run game. He had a great O-line, and Vikings need to surround him with that stuff. But I think we're all like, oh, J.J. McCarthy's the quarterback. Well, hold on. Like, externally, let's look at what he can do to be successful and not just have him drop back 45 times a game and be slinging it around. That's probably not his path to be successful. So can you have the running game around him? Can you beef up the offensive line so he can maybe supplement and be a game manager or ease into how he's supposed to be a quarterback? And then if he develops appropriately and he is really good, and then maybe he does go into a guy that passes a ton. But I think having the infrastructure, a solid run game, a beefed up offensive line, that's stuff that they have to accomplish, because the playmaking side, I think they obviously have check marks with Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson. So it's a good point to think about when they're trying to figure out how they want to fix their running game and make life easier for him. Justin, how about you, man? What do you want to see them do in the draft? Are you down for the running back help? Do they need more draft picks? What's kind of the draft strategy for the Vikings this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think combination of both. I kind of was saying before we started recording this that I kind of had a more of a reckless speculation kind of thing, and I wanted to throw out there for the draft. But before Darnold had those kind of two bad games at the end, everybody was talking about potentially getting a second or third round pick on a tag and trade, right? I personally don't think that's going to happen anymore. I mean, I think Darnold walks, and if we can figure out what that compensation is going to look like, we might get another third, fourth round comp next year. So, my biggest thing, and this is more like ideal for me, I guess, when it comes to the draft, but I love Ashton Genty. I mean, being out here in the Pacific Northwest, I watched a lot of his games. That guy is a beast. He's humble. He's a good person. And he came from a lot of adversity, which I think would, fit well with our organization. But so ideally for me would be if somehow we can tag and trade either Sam, or my other prospect was the Ginkster. I know that's going to throw a lot of things out there, but we have Dallas Turner waiting in the wings. He only had 50, I think you said 15 to 20% of the snaps this year, but I think he's going to be unleashed. And if we go get defensive interior, let's say we re-sign Ward, let's say we re-sign Bullard, Phillips is there. It's like we're still not going to have room for a first-round pick who is still – I mean, we can't afford to have Dallas Turner do another 15 to 20% of snaps, I feel like.
Yeah.
So – I think I looked up, and Gink has he signed a 2-year deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so he only has like 1 year, 10 mil left.
Mm-hmm.
So Pro Bowler, his value is super high. Can you find a trade partner for a second or third round pick for him? Make room for Dallas Turner.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love it. Love the reckless speculation. I mean,
I love Gink. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm looking more future. I'm looking at playing those comp picks. And so my ideal of coming back to it then for Genty would be if he does fall past Dallas, can you couple that number 24 in our third round next year to jump the Broncos? Because I think the Broncos would be the next good fit for him, and then go get Ashton Genty. And then in the second round with that pick, if you get a second round, I really like Deion Walker. He's a Kevin Williams, Pat Williams, clog up the interior. And he might be a little bit of a project. I heard Thor talking about it on the last episode. I think it was today's. But he's huge, man. I mean, he's the Williams brothers combined into one big dude. I think that would be awesome. But if he doesn't slip past Dallas, I like a stick and pick at Kenneth Grant. Maybe if you get that second round pick, look at Hampton or even that Caleb Johnson from Iowa, I think it is. And then your third round pick, you can go cornerback, guard, center. Something like that.
Yeah, Van Ginkel, I mean, love it. Love the reckless piece. You could even make, because he has void years at the end of this year. Like, he's going to make like $10 or $12 million. They might just make a new contract for him to lower his cap hit for this year. Not have to have him go into a walk year for next year where they're bidding for teams. He would certainly, I would assume you could get at least a second round pick for him. Now, do you want to take away someone that was like a very important cog of your defense? But to your point, well, that it's more of it gets you something that you need in a draft pick, but also it clears way for Dallas Turner, who they traded up to go get, that played pretty much a limited and like almost a red shirt-esque season. So I understand it. I get it. It's spicy. I would
it just mixes in,
Yeah, I like it. No, I like it. I'm gonna bring it up to Mackie and Judd and see what they think mean,
And that kind
but
of, I
Well,
mean,
Mackey's
sorry to
gonna be
interrupt
so
you.
oh,
upset.
he's gonna be so mad.
Oh yeah,
He'll be
I
so
That's
upset.
his
He will
guy.
shoot it down immediately. He'll shoot
I
it
love
down
Gink.
immediately.
The play that like kind of pops up to me is when Gink just leveled Jameer Gibbs in that Week 18 game. Like
Yeah.
I love Gink. I love the guy, but you can free up cap space, make room for Turner, and get a draft pick. I mean, it's like I know it could be far out there, but it ties in with me then saying that's why you signed DJ Reed and Murphy, because then you don't have to focus on a cornerback in the draft and be super young there and develop. I mean, you can go later rounds that you can develop up because Mekhi Blackman's coming back, but then you have Bynum, and then you have Smith and Theo Jackson. Obviously, Bynum being kind of the floating one out there, but that kind of ties in all the work. And then you got a workhorse and Genty and McCarthy for the next 10 years, and then Dallas Turner and Deion Walker, if you can pull that off, or another interior guy for the next 10 years. Man, you got 4 guys for the next 10 years that are going to just rip it up on both sides.
I like it a lot. Hey, shout out to our friends at Standard Heating and standardheating.com. So if you're furnace, you got them HVAC problems, whether you're a home owner, whether you're renting a house or renting an apartment like I am, Standard Heating can still come out and help you out. So if you're looking to get that furnace and HVAC system working, if you have no idea what you're looking at, like I am most of the time when it comes to any household chore, give Standard Heating a call. Don't DIY it. Call Standard Heating. They're great. Their technicians are always updating and learning new things. They're a family-owned business. They go back almost 100. They go back many, many years. Go to standardheating.com to book your HVAC and furnace service. Keep those furnaces working nice and hot. Keep these hot takes fresh too on Purple Daily. Shout out to standardheating.com to learn more. So, boys, before we wrap here, favorite Vikings of all time. I kind of like to ask Evergreen and get into the weeds of how everyone became Vikings fans. Steven, your favorite Viking of all time. Who is it?
So it's funny. I grew up around baseball, so I'm a baseball fan first and foremost. And then as I was a teenager, my stepdad was always going out to the bar to watch football. So I started in 2007, actually, going out, watching football games, and naturally became a Vikings fan. I don't know if that's unfortunate or not yet. I mean, we'll see in my lifetime. But I mean, that also happened to be, I believe, Adrian Peterson's rookie year. So honestly, I mean, it was such a privilege, especially as a young teenager, just getting to watch a player of his caliber. I will never forget watching the Brett Favre year and week 1 against the Browns, that 64-yard touchdown run that Adrian Peterson broke off, where he just stopped and threw Eric Wright out of bounds and sprinted down into the end zone. If we could find a guy like that, and I mean, it's hard to find an Adrian Peterson. He's a generational player, but just somebody who has the ability to create plays like that, what Saquon Barkley's doing for the Eagles when you put a good offensive line around somebody. I think this team is just there's no limit to how good they could be. They could be in that NFC Championship game every year and pushing to try to win a Super Bowl and take down the almighty Chiefs. So, I think just hopefully that means that we find that guy moving forward, the next Adrian Peterson. I'd love to see it in my lifetime, but it was just such a blast getting to watch him run. And he always just ran so viciously, it was so much fun watching him. He carried the team for a lot of those Tavares Jackson and just kind of filler quarterback years. So made it a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, he was like the last true superstar power running back. I mean, if a lot of fans grew up with him, I was in 8th, 9th grade when they drafted him. I always loved going back and watching his highlights, not because he was a beast and throwing people all around the field like rag dolls, but I love that he would legitimately line up like 10 yards behind the quarterback just so he could get like this full head of steam to get like so much inertia and so much speed to like shake off those tackles and rip off big runs. Yeah, he was a player that in the era of running backs we're getting away. Like, yeah, Derrick Henry was a monster this year. Saquon is obviously having this absurd season. It kind of felt like he was the last true superstar running back, and Saquon's having a season. I think that's probably reminiscent of that this past year. But yeah, AP, absolute treat to watch. Loved watching him. I know he didn't make the best off the field decisions, and it kind of like it's a dark cloud over his illustrious career. But he was an absolute blast to watch. Justin, how about you, man? Who's your favorite Viking of all time?
Definitely AP is definitely up there, for sure. I would say growing up, playing in the backyard, you always mossed people. So I'm going to have to go out and say, the Randy Moss era. Obviously, you got to shout out Moss. And then a couple dark horses for me would be Percy Harvin during the AP era a little bit. I loved Percy when he was healthy. I thought he was explosive as heck. And then back in the day, my dad always showed me highlights of Chuck Foreman. So I loved me another running back there, another Chuck Foreman, just plowing through people. But I would definitely say AP and Moss are up there for sure.
I dig it. Before we wrap up here on Vikings Vent Line, any last hot takes? I mean, Justin, you dropped the great Andrew Van Ginkel take. I'll get to you in just a second if you have another one in your bag. But Steven, how about you, man? Any last takes? Any shout outs you'd love to give here on Vikings Vent Line before we wrap up?
Yeah, shout out to my stepdad. Thank you for making me a Vikings fan. I look forward to it. Football season every year, just be able to get together, watch the games, just have that bonding time and just get lost into the Vikings season. I remember watching week 1 against the Giants this year, just zero expectations, and we had such a fun ride. And I mean, ultimately, I know it didn't wind up the way we wanted to. You could say this team maybe overachieved a little bit, but you gotta look toward the future and be really positive about the outlook of this team. I mean, in a retooling year, here we are going 14-3 and making the playoffs again. So you really can't be mad at that. Last hot take I have is just don't even entertain re-signing Sam Darnold. I don't care what costs, 30, 40, 50. I feel like there comes a point with certain players, you see it all the time. Are they or are they not good under pressure? I mean, Darnold had an incredible regular season, and some of those games he won for us in fourth quarter comebacks, whether it's against the Seahawks or the Cardinals, or I guess technically the Falcons as well. But I mean, in terms of a player like him, I mean, he's got some trauma and baggage that he's had to carry through the NFL in his career at this point. I don't think that I don't think he's just going to be written off. I think he'll get an opportunity with another team. But what we saw in Week 18 against the Lions, and then especially against the Rams, heck, I was watching him on the Pro Bowl games. He's still holding onto the ball too long. So, I mean, personally, I feel like don't even entertain bringing him back. It was a great one-hit wonder. We'll always remember the 2024 season. But, I mean, you got to move forward with a guy who can perform under pressure. And McCarthy's won wherever he's been. He won a national championship. He has that moxie to him. I just don't think Darnold has that in his DNA to be able to perform under pressure. So why would we give another quarterback a Kirk Cousins contract knowing he couldn't do the same? So
I like it. Justin, any last takes? Any shout outs?
Yeah, I mean, this last take here, going back to what I said about Gink there, I just, wanted everybody to know too, I took into consideration kind of your guys' blueprint of extensions and freeing people up and having that like 79-ish mil, I think it was, once you do all of that in cap space, plus adding in an extra probably 10 million in that cap raise. So I kind of went a little bit over the top and just kind of being optimistic about that, leaving in some reserves. But I just think, we need to get better as a team too, to know when people are going to cliff off and capitalizing values. I love Gink. If he stays, I'm going to be thrilled as heck, but I really am high on Dallas Turner. I think that he could be a really big end for us. So I think if you can sure up and get a pick out of that and give him some more PT and fit and flow system, I think that will be huge. So I think we go make a huge splash and see what JJ McCarthy has. And then lastly, just thank you to my girlfriend for, listening to me every Sunday yell at the Vikings and supporting my bad Viking habits. And then my dad and then my other dad, Bob, as well. They're both Vikings fans. They brought me up. They always say all the time, it's like, wait till you're our age and you got to wait this long for a Super Bowl. And then last but not least, thank you to the Vikings for making me miserable enough to stick it through and just keep getting further and further into these blueprints to try to help you guys win one. So thank you, everybody.
Oh, I appreciate both you guys. Justin, Steven, thank you for coming on Vikings Vent Line. Great job. Great takes. Anyone who's listening, watching, wants to come on a future episode, you can hit me up. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. Hit me up there, and I'd love to get you on a future episode. Purple Daily Vikings Entertainment. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.